Welcome, Leslie. It's so nice to have you on the Evolving Leadership and Workplace Culture Virtual Summit. So happy that you could be here and chat with me today on some of these topics. So for the people,
Thank
for our
you.
guests, thank you. For the guests that aren't familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing.
So, hi to everyone. I'm Leslie Short, and I am the owner of the Kavu Group. And I work with companies and organizations working on company culture, leadership, diversity and inclusion, bias trainings, workshops, interactive, do coaching, that type of thing. But really trying to work with companies to expand beyond their current culture, which means think differently.
hmm Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. So the title we've titled this virtual summit "Evolving Leadership and Workplace Culture," and it sounds like that's what you're talking about,
That's what
right?
I
Like
do all day.
how do we think about it different? Like how do we evolve, right? So for
Yes.
you, what does evolving leadership mean? What does that look like for you?
Evolving leadership is really understanding that what worked before doesn't mean it will work today.
Mm.
Doesn't mean it's bad. It just
hmm
means that you may need to shift um, even some employees, the workspace, the attitude, projects, vendors. It's always looking for what's next, but never
Yeah,
forgetting your purpose today.
yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love that. I think that that's where a lot of companies have gotten hung up in the past, right? It's like, well, this is
Yes.
this is working, like it's good enough,
Yeah.
right? And we're so busy just trying to keep everything else afloat, that
Change is
it's
hard,
yeah yeah
but change is now.
yeah yeah
you
yeah
know,
exactly. Yeah, and we'll get into that a little bit,
you
on
know.
this conversation too. So what does workplace culture mean to you? What does that include?
It's different for every single company, and that is the trick. Because again, it works for another company, doesn't mean your leadership is the same, your
hmm
employees are the same, your mission is the same. It's
Right.
understanding that it's more than a handbook or a pizza day or a ping pong table or gift cards or any of that. You
hmm
have to create it. It's not something you discuss. Company
hmm
culture needs to be created and
Yeah.
cultivated. And
hmm
it's forever changing and evolving with as the growth of the company does
Yeah.
that. If
Yeah.
you're doing it right. The issue is again, people get, oh, well, we gave cupcakes on every other birthday. We're good with that.
Right.
Yeah, but you have a different degree of people that work for you now.
hmm
The 30-year-old is the CEO and the 60-year-old is the assistant.
Right.
So how do you evolve your leadership thinking into your company culture
Yeah.
thinking? Because it starts with leadership.
hmm Yeah, I read something recently that said that you shouldn't like that. What you're saying, like kind of your
Mm.
culture should grow. Like you shouldn't be so set with the culture you started. But I was kind of the mindset that when you start a company, you really should have some strong, and I would say values in place. So maybe I'm
Mhm.
confusing like values with culture.
Yes,
So
different.
so tell me more about that.
Values is the foundation for which you stand.
Okay.
If you're doing quality work, if you um, believe that everyone has a stake in the company, those are things that you build your company's thought process on.
hmm
And that's your thinking. That's
Right.
the big picture. Now,
Right.
when you bring others into your fold, you have to begin to live the values. Those values
hmm
have to breathe.
hmm
And those that are working there need to not only see them up on a wall or on a plaque, but feel
Right.
them each day when they walk in and feel that their investment. Company culture is investing your
hmm
employees in to your values.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been kind of trying to figure out this idea of incentivizing your employees on the like based on values, right? How do you not just incentivize them on performance, right? Like making the widgets, like whatever their part is,
Right.
right? And making the
Right.
widgets, right? But like also incentivizing, the culture and
But
the
are you saying
values.
incentivizing as in if I bring someone in, then I get $10 more? Or is it, I don't know. I don't believe in that. I don't know. I don't want to say I don't believe in
hmm
incentivize. It is a purpose for it. But I
Yeah.
believe if you are coming to work in a place
hmm
where you feel value
hmm
and the values match internally and
Right.
externally is somewhere you can
Right.
be proud to show up to every day, that
Mhm.
is your incentive to be part of that process.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then as it grows, to continue to hopefully get promoted, be involved with the
Right.
foundation work or diversity work, whatever that is,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
also brings you joy that you get to do within your company. Now,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean your life revolves around your company. I think that's where employees get stuck as well.
Right.
It's work. But to
Mhm.
incentivize, I know a lot of companies now are starting to do that with diversity and inclusion.
Mhm.
Oh, if you suggest someone, then if we hire them, then you get an extra $200.
Mhm.
Well, I look at that twofold. Is that $200 worth when even your best buddy that you thought was going to be great does not turn out right, and it
Right.
doesn't turn out right, and they look at you like
Right.
it's that
Yeah.
fine line. Like, I understand companies say I'd rather start with someone knows, but what
Yeah.
a bias that is to everyone else that's out there that is
Mhm.
also great and doesn't have that opportunity.
Yeah.
So, values and company culture, all of those things, how you hire, how you promote your people, how you
Mhm.
treat them on a daily basis, that's
Right.
company culture.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's awesome. So what do you think about so how has, this coronavirus situation, COVID-19, all of us working, like most, I should not say all of us, many people working from home.
Yes.
My heart goes out to all those folks that are not able to work from home and are considered in essential positions. But I think for the purpose of this conversation, we'll probably talk mostly about all these folks working from home right now, and how does that impact workplace culture?
I If you didn't have one to begin with, you probably don't have one now. And it is really, and I just told you before, I'm in the midst of writing a book, so I've been interviewing people,
Mhm.
and I've actually had to go back and kind of re-interview
Mm.
new sets of people because
Mhm.
of this. And what I've noticed is, for some companies, they have forgotten about um, anyone that's not C-suite or leadership. So
Right.
they're off having their meetings, and then they're doing the trickle down theory, which is not a pass in the hallway, but a half of an email.
Right.
And then that person is supposed to tell this assistant. And so much is getting lost, and they're not even the opportunity of seeing leadership once a week. It's
Right.
still like, oh, speak to your supervisor, where your
Yeah.
supervisor is at home with 2.2 kids,
Mhm.
a mate, you know, and who knows what size living area.
Right. Right.
And so now your supervisor is also teacher, mother, wife, girlfriend, husband, boyfriend, whatever that
Mhm.
is,
Mhm.
on top of telling you to go do something, and something's crashing in the back. So
Right.
there, I think companies have forgotten how to, they have not circled the wagons, and not all, but the
Mhm.
majority that I've been speaking to have felt
Yeah.
very disenfranchised with their
Mhm.
companies, because it was either lack of communication. Now, let's be honest, this knocked everybody on their side.
Right.
So this wasn't like, oh, in 3 weeks, we're going to shut down the office and clean
Mhm.
the office, and everyone take your laptops and make sure you take your files. We're going to work from home. That's not what this
Right.
is. It's like, the state has shut us down.
Right.
There's a
Right.
virus. My mother, my father, it was all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when the employees come to me and ask what's happening, I go, let's look at that. Let's look at it from their
Mhm.
standpoint.
Mhm.
They had to circle the wagons very quickly. The issue was, there was a lack of communication
Mhm.
on what was going to happen, even to say, I don't know what's going to happen.
Right. Right. Yeah.
You're going to be home, and I'm going to let you know in a few days.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if one of your values, core values from the beginning, is not authenticity or transparency, right? And you don't hold that as a value, and you weren't already operating, with that, and building that trust with your employees, then yeah, now it's just a crisis, right? And you're dealing with whatever big decisions, that you have to make. And so,
Plus vendors, plus.
yeah, exactly.
But so let me go back to one word quick: transparency.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with a CEO that said it best.
Mm-hmm.
As a CEO, or as a certain level leadership, it
Right.
is very hard to be transparent.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell that to employees all the time. But that doesn't mean you can't be visible. That is a much better word, because transparent, there's no such thing as transparency. You're never going to know what the book says. You don't know what accountant says. You just saw that a new machine came in, or there was 5 new hires and you didn't get your raise. You know, we don't know what's happening.
Right. So communication around that.
Communication around that.
Right.
I can be visible, but transparency is something that a lot of them don't even have the right to be. And so I want to always start to clarify that when we start speaking about leadership, because I would love for every other leader to pick up on that. And when he said it to me, I said, I'm going to use that from now on. I applaud you for looking at it that way.
Yeah, so I think what I was picking up from what you said earlier was maybe more vulnerability, right? So when you said, for the leader to say, I don't know, right? Like work,
That's
like
the truth.
Right. Like, I don't know what's happening, like, let's figure this out together. And I think that's the thing. It's that involving your people, right? Involving your team, not just shutting yourself, in a room with whatever level of leadership and then, cutting everybody out until you figure it out. Like I think that's what I'm hearing is happening as well. It sounds like that's what you're hearing.
I would go home. We will be in touch in 3 days.
Right.
I don't know what we're going to be in touch with. We would be in touch with 3 days. You have your laptops, you have your files, continue to work with your teams. Let us come back. But what happened was people were cut off their health insurance, didn't know. Someone went in for a surgery. Guess what? They had no health insurance. They had not been told. COBRA had not kicked in yet. They had not applied for unemployment. So the list just went on. Their credit cards were cut. But they had money on the credit card that was due back. So it's just, listen, everyone, because when furlough happens, everything has to stop. But you don't decide to furlough at midnight and furlough the next day. You decide that call at midnight and you give everybody a day or 24 to 48 hours to go, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
People will want longer, but the reality of what this virus was, this crisis was, no one had the luxury of 72 hours.
Right.
They really didn't. And not if they were going to apply for any type of funds. So taking that into consideration, communication is still key.
Yep.
I don't know. We're going to let you know this is what it is. Sorry, it's only 48 hours. And how about the fact of when you're working remote that the single supervisor that doesn't have the family or kids is calling everybody all day and pinging everybody all night and want things done, at 10:30. I spoke to my attorney today. He's like, I'm over here being, 5th grade teacher. He's like, the baby's asleep. I'm working with this one. The other one's grown up. And I need to get on 2 action calls.
Yeah.
It's not that time.
Oh my God. It's so amazing to me how stark that shift has been, right? Before, if you had an employee that was working from home, there was just so much skepticism around anything that they were doing that was not work related, right? It was just so much, I think, emotion and attitude, paying attention to bias. Yes, for sure bias, right? And now that and granted, like you said, not all of us, have kids underfoot and, have all of these other distractions going on. But it is definitely a learning curve, I think, for those that are now in that situation and those of us who see others in that situation, and extending that, that empathy, that compassion to them. If somebody says like, hey, I need to reschedule this call or whatever, right? Like I can't deliver, something we agreed on. I think most people, I'm sure there are some people that haven't quite, caught up with this, right? But like, I think for a lot of people, this is definitely a shift where it's, people seeing that there are other priorities and, cutting your coworker some slack, hopefully is something that might carry into the future. I mean, we'll see, we'll see.
I think some of it will. And here's the other thing that some companies, because I never like to group everyone, even though it's the majority, will no longer have an excuse not to hire people with disabilities. Because before it was the same thing. Oh, I can't have you working off site. I don't know what you're doing. There is zero excuse at this moment of why anyone that is qualified, that has a disability, that cannot come into an office every day, cannot work from home now. If I have one leader tell me that's an issue, when someone is qualified, they and I are going to have a serious conversation.
Yeah, I just saw a tweet on that exact thing this morning and said this crisis has inadvertently made, employers, like see that they can accommodate 15%, of the workforce, right? Like
Right.
people with disabilities, like, oh, you can actually hire them. So yeah, that's spot on
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. So I guess, so we kind of have gotten into this. So what else, are there other things, other differences you see? What will the office look like in the future?
I mean, that is yet to be determined, but
Mhm.
I want to throw a couple scenarios out.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a open workspace, I think if anyone coughs, sneeze, or looks like they're rubbing their nose, somebody's going to have an attitude. I'm just going to throw out that.
It's
I'll
pretty
come
safe
back to
to
the
say.
scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you are in offices with doors and you call someone into your office, someone may be like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There is going to have to be a shift in space. Is it
Mm-hmm.
going to look like you have staff rotating in and out? Now,
Right.
here's what happened with that. I don't know who sat here yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sitting here. Was the
Yeah.
office fully clean? Have
Right.
you and not by a cleaning crew.
Right.
People are going to be looking for steam cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say to every leader, you need to look at that as a new line item in your budget from
Yep.
now moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
It will not just only be the everyday cleaning and everyone else having to take effort
Right.
into the
Right.
day of the messy desk because you're creative.
Yeah.
That's gone. So we're gonna have to
I love it. Yeah.
you are going to really have to get used to your Clorox
Yeah.
wipes
Yeah.
on your desk.
Yeah.
I think that's going to, things on your desk
Yeah.
is going to shift. I think this amount of space, I'm thinking of two companies now that sit on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep thinking like, wow, how are they going to go back in that space and anyone feel comfortable regardless of how well you're treated?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I had read something a while back that it caught my attention because I had worked, the last time I worked in an office, it was in a building that was really old. And this article I had read was about the, like, just air filtration systems in some of these buildings, like, and these older buildings, like, you're literally recycling air through the whole building. Like, there's different companies, right? Different offices on different floors, and that air is staying inside, like,
and
that
no one
building.
is changing it. And so that's the HVAC. And no office building is changing their entire HVAC system.
Right.
I don't think anyone even realized what that is. The article that came out today is that air condition.
Yeah.
That 9 people were in a space, in an office, and the air condition is what moved it. Yet there's reports that say the air conditioner fans help keep moving it. Again, we're working with something that we can't see and we don't know.
Right.
So what companies need to do is really sit down, and honestly, I think they need to bring a consultant in that can work with them, so that's not so involved, and say, let's move this desk over here, let's shift this over here, and really look at things that they're not going to be thinking of because they're trying to get back to work to make a dollar, which is fair. But this is the time where consultants really come into play of helping you redesign, helping you look at business from a new light,
right?
Because you're not going to be able to bring everyone back in. And number one, you can't hit the switch and bring everybody back in and do combat. We're back, because that's going to last for the first week for some, and then someone's going to say something crazy because something happened. You're going to be getting like a roller coaster of emotions. This virus has touched everyone, so that goes back to company culture. Are you prepared to have grief counselors and diversity counselors and all these people, ready for your staff? Because if you think anyone's coming back in is actually going to work for the first week, unless they are doing, which is where you see that belt going,
right?
You're still going to need to deal with people.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to think that letting the folks that want to work from home, like to continue to work from home, letting those folks work from home, and the ones that want to come back in the office, like, let them come back in the, I would love to think it would just be as easy as that. And, then you'd have fewer people in the office and it'll work itself out. Right. But I know.
Need to be choreographed.
Right.
And there's some teams that can't, I get it, but that is really going to need to be choreographed. And so for anyone that's not thinking about how they are going to proceed with that logistical staffing,
right,
is really going to do themselves a disservice. And then let's talk about the companies that didn't treat them right. Let's talk about the companies that didn't treat the consumer right. You have to deal with all of that when people come back in.
Yeah.
It's a lot to look at, and I'm sure leaders are overwhelmed, but this is going to be the new normal of the moment, and we need to adjust.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, these phrases like new normal, and yeah, I like how you added the new normal of the moment. Like,
yeah,
none of us have any timelines, right? It's kind of like we have no idea what's happening tomorrow versus 3 months versus a year. And, it's like,
and I refuse to call it the new normal because we have yet to know what that is.
Right.
So
right.
It's the normal of the moment. Like, we can speak next week, and I'll be like, okay, listen, we need to cut off all the air.
Right. And we're creating it together. Right.
Yes.
And that's why it's weird to say, the new normal is because it's like, it will be what we create it to be.
Yes.
Not like what we're talking about. Like, really it comes down to actions. What
Yes.
do companies ultimately do? And then, normal is just a matter of like, what are most of them doing? Right. I mean, that's.
And that even can't be normal because again, you're not going to be able to do what somebody else does or across the board. You may be able to use a mold or model figure of it, but if you try to cookie cut this thing going back, your employees aren't the same employees over there, even if you're making the same widget or the same sneaker or the same t-shirt. It's completely different.
No, I know everybody thinks they're just going back to how it was.
Woo!
Right?
No.
Right? Not a new normal. Like they think, like whatever. Once we're allowed to leave our homes, like just back to work. Like pretend like nothing happened.
Yeah.
Like
I'm gonna be here.
Right.
I'm gonna let everybody run.
Right. Exactly.
The first month or so.
Right.
I'll be right here on webinar.
Right. Exactly.
But this conversation, the way that we're speaking now, will continue, I believe, to take place. Because, which for some that means company travel will probably still be cut. I know somebody's company was already cut until 2021.
So Microsoft and Facebook have cut events until I think mid 2021. Right. But and that's just like their events. But I think you're totally right. I think just companies, those companies and others, supporting their employees to travel for whatever reason, meet with one client versus go to a big conference. Like you're still in an airplane, right, with lots of other people and recycled air and everything just to get there.
Right.
And so all of that is going to continue to see a drastic reduction. And unfortunately, folks in the events industry haven't fully accepted that it's not going to just go back to normal when our governments say that we can leave our houses.
No, I'm having that conversation actually with Liz because it is not. There's not one industry that will go back to normal.
Right.
Will 3M go back to doing Post-its and masks? I mean, that's what they were doing. And they're going to take it down a degree and they're probably going to breathe. Or can they take it down a degree? Because they're shipping to another country that may have something. So again, even with them, we just don't know. And for any company that thinks that they put an employee on a plane and they're not responsible for that employee,
right,
that's going to be an issue. So also handbooks will now need to be rewritten.
Yep.
This is not in anyone's handbook. This is not in any company manual anywhere.
Right. Exactly. Oh, that's awesome. So in the future, so let's say you've been lucky, you've had a fairly decent culture, as a leader, and but really it hasn't been so intentional, right? Like it's just like maybe you're a good person, you're a good leader, and you've created a pretty good culture. What should leaders be thinking about in setting the tone for their culture in whatever we want to call the future?
I go when we come out on the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I've been writing to people.
Yeah.
When we come out on the other side or in the middle of the side, they're going to really need to be open enough to have hard conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And if they are not open enough to do it, to bring in people that can do it with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is going to show employees, regardless of size of company. I don't want to hear we're too big for it or too little for it. Any leader should be able to bring someone in and just say, if they're not comfortable with having to speak about, again, death and productivity and what it's going to look like and how, as a company, we're going to now still be reshaping it together. It's a great, as horrible as this whole thing is, for companies, if they have to look on the other side of this for being positive, this is a great kickstart. If your culture wasn't great, if it is great, it's another just layer that you get to come in and just pull folks together. If you weren't sure yet, if you were still building, it's a great way to say, okay, we're going to build this together, but our values are still the same. Or some leader may go, you know what? This has taught me that our values need to shift. And this is what I see. And that may be a positive for employees. But leadership has to be real with themselves and their boards. I'm going to throw them in because some of them are listening to the board. And you have to remember that every employee is not the same. And as I was on a webinar yesterday, and I said, you have to remember your privilege, because everyone did not come back from an amazing house. And even the person that you thought was great could have been coming back from an abused home or just in a surroundings that was not comfortable. And everyone's going to feel all of that, because this was not a week or a weekend where you can put on a happy face and come back into the office. So I think leaders need to be prepared to deal with that as well as work.
Yeah, that's been an interesting thing I've noticed. I don't know that many people who are, I would say, like super private, but for that, for those people who you really just need that separation between, work and their home life, like they don't let any, their work, like coworkers, like they don't want them to know anything about, them in their personal lives. Like this must just be absolutely devastating for them, like to have to blur that line, somebody, and you bring up, severe cases of people that are really dealing with, horrible things at home, or just, things that don't make their home, working at home conducive.
But that's the reality. See, because we all like to put on the work facade and go in. And we are who we are to our leaders, and we make things happen. And that's why a lot of people do have the separation, or know what you know. People are going to come back with all of this. And I'm not saying leaders are in charge of being the psychiatrists and all of that type of things. That's what I'm saying. Those services need to be put into place. You need to relook at your diversity and inclusion efforts and how that has impacted, because whether you're an essential worker or not essential worker, you're coming, this has touched everyone. At some point, someone knows something, someone that was in the hospital or someone that passed, or everyone's coming back with this. You're going to have to deal with it. If you want productive work, if you want your bottom line to come back, you will now have to be in the people business.
Yes. Oh my God. I love it. Exactly. and that's been my journey, right? I didn't realize, until I had, until I was dealing with grief and some of these emotions, right, that were impacting my work, and didn't realize it, right? Because I just didn't know, like, you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't have that background in psychology and, emotion, like training in emotional intelligence and those things, like, you just think like what you just described, you just think like, oh, you just go to work and you can put on your, your work face and get it done. But it's not real. Like that, like that doesn't, and now it's like not happening to one person, right? It's not like, right. It's not like, oh, that person, hasn't been very productive lately, or maybe they're a little bit shorter with, their colleagues. Like in the past, it was easy to just blame that person. And a lot of times just kick them out because you're like, oh, that person is too negative. Like you don't want to deal with.
They don't fit into our company culture.
Right. They don't fit. Like they don't exactly. Exactly. Because that's exactly what happens. Right. And exactly what has happened to me. And so now that it's like happening to everybody, it's going to be hard to just point at one person and say like, oh, maybe they're not a fit anymore. It's like, no, this is, we're all dealing with some form of grief.
Something in
right?
trauma. And, I went into one company, as I also work as a corporate operations strategist, and I was going in to help them rebrand and reshift and hire and build a D&I department. So I had a big overall assessment of the company. And when it was time to start working with the employees, the first thing I always ask is kind of, what do you do here? And meanwhile, I've spoken to leadership, and it usually never really matches up. But that's a whole other thing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God, yeah.
But what happened was that there was 2 employees that had just lost their mother in a matter of months. So those departments were reeling. The one person had just started a job, and so they felt that they couldn't take off. And I went to the CEO and I said, I need you to give this person 3 weeks off. The first 2 weeks, no one's allowed to speak to them. The third week, I'll check in. We actually want to give them 4 weeks because they are of no service to you at all whatsoever. Yet they are amazing at what they do. So you need this person back in full force, but you're not even getting a quarter of what they're worth right now. And they agreed with me, and we made that happen. And she looked at me and she just started crying in the office. She's like, you're not supposed to cry. I'm a female in the office.
I know.
And she's like, I would have never asked for it. I would have never stood up for it.
Yeah.
I mean, she came back. She came back, So we are really going to have to take a step to rebuild not only business, but people within your business.
Yeah. And it's not like everybody needs a month off, right? Like it's just being aware of, as we, it's different for everybody. Like, the timelines are different for everybody. So yeah, it's just having that awareness of yourself first, like learning more about yourself and your emotional, health, but then, using those tools then to help your people. And I think you're right. I think, most, if you went to school for business and that's all you've done, right? Like you're great at running a business, but like you said, you're not, didn't occur to you that maybe, some psychology or, some human issues were gonna, come into play. That's what human resources is for, right? Like we think that they're the ones that are taking care of the humans, but they're not.
But not really, no. And, I think years ago, maybe more so than today, and that's not for every single human resource person, but you're working in a company of 300 or a company of 30 or company of 3. Human resources is not trained in chaplaincy and conflict coaching and transformational coaching. That's not what they are trained in. So it's, they get thrown into that position a great deal, but this is very different. This is hire a small team that's available to your staff the first month. A month retainer, invest in 3 people, 2 people that's available to be with your staff, to walk through, to help even do assessments with you. And just come back and tell you, this is what I see. I don't need to tell you who I spoke to.
Right.
I can just tell you, I saw this amount of people, just so you can gauge where you are. Because I think it's going to backfire for those that don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think there are enough folks that are trained in these capacities and, just have these the skills, or are we going to find a shortage of, bringing these folks in? Like, are there enough people that doing that work?
I mean, maybe because I'm biased because I do it. And so I know a lot of people that do it. I think there are. I think here's what I also say. I'm someone that's lucky because that's another part of my life that I do, but that I bring those skills into business because I know business and I'm about business and I know the bottom line and I know how to shift and cut and move. So I come in with a perspective of understanding what leadership needs to get to and how I get employees to help them get there. That's the part that may be a shift, but it's okay as long as you have someone that understands your vision and your goal and let them do what they do. They're not an employee of yours. They're a consultant for a month. And there's enough of those people. I do believe so.
Yeah. I think I was researching industrial organizational psychology, right? I'm fascinated with this idea that, all of the stuff that we're talking about, the emotions of employees and engaging them and developing them. But so that kind of combination between business and psychology, right, is my take on it.
We can't get too sorry, PhDs. I know I've been beating up on everyone who has PhDs. So I'm so I don't have one.
I know, right?
Like I don't have one. But I'm going to say this way: we can't get too PhD on it. No one's trying to do the psychic of the whole brain while everyone's there. You're trying to get someone. The thing about like conflict coaching, it's working with that person to say, this is the issue. How do you, not the employee, how do you build to get past that so you can get done what you need to get done? If you can't move the tree, how do you go around the tree, under the tree, climb up the tree? How, give them those types of skills. Yeah. That's what's needed right now. No one needs to go in and feel like they're being psychoanalyzed. They just want to be able to go in and go, ugh, and someone goes, how do you want to fix it? And then help them do that and back off. That's the small difference where I think we have to be careful of just not going with anything, finding the right people that works for your culture.
Right, exactly. I think in some cases that's what is needed, and in some cases, it's something else. So this is great. Well, I'm glad that you'll, be a great resource, for the people that watch this. And it sounds like you know a lot of other people that can also do this work. So it sounds like you'll be a great, resource either way, right? Either hire Leslie or
and I have other people,
Right, exactly. Or you can refer other people. So that's great. So any last tips on like in the current state of things and my preference would be, that most employees are allowed to continue to work remotely if that's what they want to do. So, any last as we kind of close it up here, any tips for managing in that remote kind of environment? How do you keep the culture going when your folks are you're not seeing them in person every day?
I think it is that that group meeting. So clearly you're having your conversations with your supervisor and that type of thing. But I think it's even the leadership getting on, if it's once a week, and just saying, hey, everyone, just checking in. This is what's going on. I know you've been speaking with all your leaders. I just want to let you know that we're working on our side of what may be next, which changes every day. And being able to not only have that senior C-suite leadership just speaking to the CEO leadership, that people feel that they're engaged. And even if I was a leader and I had certain groups, even if I had to break it up and I'm sitting with the design team and I'm like, hey guys, this is what's happening. And I'm sitting over here with widgets and I'm sitting with advertising, and I would make sure that I'm keeping that face. And I would tell people, honestly, do emails, but you must have a face-to-face call at least 2 to 3 times a week. I'm gonna let your supervisor figure out when that is.
Yeah.
And no pictures, no dogs or cats. Face-to-face, each team on the screen.
Yeah. It goes back to the communication.
Yes.
It's literally just being in touch. Like you're right. It doesn't have to be super formal. It doesn't, it doesn't have to be overly structured
all the time.
Yeah. Just that, like literally it's the human, there's maybe some debate, but human connection, right? Even if it's, on the screen, right? Like just seeing somebody and having a chat with them to help you feel like you're still connected to the company, right? Your peers, your leaders, whoever it is.
And it's like I said to one company, they were like, how about a virtual cocktail hour? I was like, that's great, but don't make it mandatory. Hey guys, this is what we're going to do at this time. If you're free, jump on. Just love to see everyone's faces.
Right.
Because everyone doesn't want to show up to everything. Like we spoke in earlier. And that's okay. Don't hold it against anyone.
Right.
Be that beacon of we're all in this together. Though very differently. Right. I understand everyone's going through something, but we're all going to figure this out as we move forward.
Right. And respect and love everyone that's, in their particular struggle going through it.
Right. I'm going to say respect the struggle, whatever that is for someone or not. And know that everyone's struggle is very different than the others, even when you assume that it is not. Do not tell someone they can't use a Zoom background. You may say, please pick a professional one, because you don't know what their living area is. They may not want to show that. Or, just be respectful of someone's time. Don't text me at 9 o'clock on a good night, let alone on a crazy. Like, just set boundaries. I think that's something a lot of companies have missed. We're going to work from 10 to 4.
Mm,
That's the time that we're all going to speak. The rest of the time, I'm asking you to be available during that time.
right. Right.
That I've heard a lot that's not happening. Or there are people are still saying I have to clock in at 9:30 to
Yeah.
6:30. What the devil are you doing? I said to someone today, what are you doing? Your industry is shut down. There's no one, even if you could speak to someone, no one can
Right.
sign off on anything.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So don't have people, I get that the way that the money is set, that your employees have to come back to work, but don't make it so that you are also disrespecting people's time and energy and
Yeah.
brain power. Figure
Yeah.
out how that's going to look.
Yeah. Well, and that was, it's so funny because I've been, I think you as well. I've been working from home or, running my own business from home for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us forget that's what it was like a lot of times when, you first had employees transitioning to remote work. It was like this idea that, you're just online, right? The same, 9 to 6, right? You're available, right? Like you need to be
Yeah.
present in some way.
Right.
And it's like, the companies that then over time kind of evolved, right? Like they evolved understanding that really what people wanted was the flexibility, right? It wasn't just that I want to be sitting at home, right? It was that, oh, I also, do need to take my kid to a doctor's appointment or whatever, right? Like I want to take a yoga class in the middle of the day, but, I'm still going to get my work done, right? Maybe it's at a different, so for everybody, it's that flexibility, autonomy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like doing what you need to do and like you're just getting it done, and
Right.
so the ones that have evolved, right, grew to understand that. So now we have all these companies that they missed out on that evolution, right? They're just jumping into like, oh, be available to me all the time and I need to see you at your desk, right?
And someone said they're actually clocking their mouse. So if their mouse hasn't moved
Unbelievable.
in 4 minutes, then they're like pinging, where are you? Now, I don't know. I guess that's why, I consult and I come in and I help you go, maybe someone just went to the restroom and grabbed water. Maybe they tripped over something. Like, can we just take that down just a bit?
I'm going to say this is why so many smart people are consultants, right? Because they were not trusted, they were not trusted to do their work, right? Like they were not given that autonomy. They were not given that trust. And this, there's so many of my friends, right? Like some of the same people you and I know, right? Like that just, this idea like, oh, I don't want to, work in a big company anymore. And this is why it just, the culture was not set up to, really value smart people and recognize that, we all deserve some flexibility and understanding and trust. Yeah.
Sometimes as a designer, as someone that's creative, you just need to get out and walk the streets and see stores and people and fabrics and colors and hear other conversation, which is going to like energize you.
Right.
And, when you don't have the flexibility, when you're clocking lunch, errands,
right,
you're not getting the best of your employees always.
Yeah.
So this is another great chance to go, how do I get the best of my employee?
Right.
That is going to be beneficial to both of us.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, that is, I think, a fantastic way to end a great chat. So
thank you.
Thanks for all of your wisdom, leadership and, the culture stuff. This is great. So if anybody wants to then get in touch with you, maybe to hire you or get your, reference referrals for other people doing that kind of work, how do people get in touch with you?
They can do it through LinkedIn and just my name, Leslie Short. Of course, the company name is the Cavu Group, CAVU Group, the Cavu Group. And my website is www.thecavugroup.com.
Okay. The Cavu Group. Great. Yep.
And then, all the social media is under the Cavu Group.
Great. Yeah. And I would say, and Leslie definitely puts out some good stuff on social too. So make sure you follow her there passively if you're not interested in connecting her, directly.
No, follow because I love to share and it's all about change, and whichever way you're going to go, let's make change together.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Leslie. Thank everybody.
You.